like to share with you, since this may actually be my last presentation as president of the foundation, share with you perhaps my personal observations on the landmine issue. For me, the first time that I really remember hearing about the issue, as with many of you, was in early 1997 when Princess Diana put on a deminer's outfit and went into Angola and had her picture taken. Her celebrity was such that she instantly took the issue from the editorial pages and put it onto page 1. And many of us will remember the images of her wearing the Kevlar vest and the blast mask walking through those minefields. One of the things I found when I got involved in the issue, first as a volunteer, was that it touched so many of the international issues that Rotary clubs and other service clubs and churches focus on. If you want to assist a community in recovering after a conflict, job 1 is to remove the landmines. If you want to assist a community to be able to access fresh drinking water, job 1 is getting rid of the landmines. If you want to restore the electricity to communities after a conflict, job 1 is removing the landmines, because you simply cannot do it. One of the things that happens during a conflict is that the relay towers of electrical systems are mined. So the wires are taken down, the towers are mined, you have to get through the mines in order to restore the wires and restore the power. In Cambodia, about a third of the HIV positive people are landmine survivors. They are people who have been afflicted by a landmine and have had to have emergency blood transfusions, and not always under favorable conditions. So many of the things that we do in Rotary really flow from the landmine issue. But, you know, I found that interesting. I found that compelling. But there's a difference between being interested in something and being committed to something. And for me, that came on April 10th, 2000. On that day, an 11-year-old girl named Emma Alec and 2 of her friends were playing in a field north of Sarajevo. And as they played, they were killed by an anti-personnel landmine. I thought how tragic it was that they had died so young. I thought how tragic it was that they had died while they were playing. And I thought how tragic it was that Emma didn't die immediately. She suffered for some time. And the people of the area, including her parents, stood on the edge of that field, unable to offer aid or comfort because she was in a minefield. But what was more than tragic was the landmine that killed those children was put into the ground as part of a military conflict that ended 5 years before the tragedy occurred. In this world, there seem to be fewer and fewer rules. But one of them is that when wars end, the surviving soldiers take their weapons and they go home. But not this one. It stays in the ground. Doesn't know the difference between war and peace. Doesn't know the difference between the footsteps of a soldier and the footsteps of a child. And it doesn't wear out. In the late 1980s into the 1990s, some of the frontline humanitarian organizations, Handicap International, the International Committee for the Red Cross, started to report what they called a disproportionate number of civilian impacts from landmines. They began to lobby governments, and they were successful in their efforts. So governments began to hold states parties meetings. They do this from time to time about certain conventional weapons. And this is usually the beginning of the formulation of international law. Now, international law is not formulated in days or weeks or months. It is formulated in years and decades. And that's the way this treaty was going. In October 1996, one of these meetings was held in our nation's capital. Our then Foreign Affairs Minister, Lloyd Axworthy, was the chair of the meeting, and he did a couple of things that were unusual. First thing he did was he invited the non-government organizations to come into the room and participate in the discussions. The NGOs had formed together a number of years before into the international campaign to ban landmines, and they were classic lobbyists. They waited in the lobby until the delegates came out, and then they talked to the delegates and advanced their point of view. Mr. Axworthy invited them to come into the room. At the end of the meeting, he did something even more unusual. He challenged those present to come back to Ottawa in 14 months and sign a comprehensive agreement. This had never been done before in the formulation of international law. You would never set a deadline. And he went one step further. He said that Canada would sign such an agreement even if it was the only signature on the page. What followed was unprecedented. In 14 months, from world center to world center, states parties met not to discuss the minutiae of international law, but almost like a labor negotiation, to say what are the words we can all live with. And when they came to Ottawa, December 3rd, 1997, they had before them an agreement that banned the production, the use, and the trade of anti-personnel landmines. It required states to destroy their stockpiles within 4 years of ratification. It required states to remove the landmines from their soil within 10 years of ratification. And it required states to assist landmine survivors. 122 countries stated their intention to enter into that agreement on that day, December 3rd, 1997. The next stage in international law is ratification. That means you have to have 40 countries that have passed laws in their own countries, and then it becomes international law. That law was declared March 1st, 1999. 2 days ago. It was the 10th anniversary. And it's surprising to me, walking around on March 1st, 2009, that I don't see more Canadians with a smile on their face, because we led the world.